So before I found grounding, it really felt like I was a victim to my circumstance or my personal nature, or I was a victim to a world that was nothing like me. It kind of felt like the world was geared towards the extroverted, logically minded, the stress tolerant individual who could literally shut off their emotions at will and keep moving forward. And had this natural bias for action and stay hard, right? And I was this sensitive, emotional being trying to figure out like what the hell was going on in here and emotions in here, let alone things like direction, purpose, routines, or even success, right? But as I came to learn more about grounding, and I've made videos about this, it no longer really made sense to identify with this neurotic personal self that would really keep me in suffering. And as a result of the grounding journey, I'd say that my needless suffering, so unnecessary suffering, has decreased by about 90%. And it's been such a liberating experience. And just to clarify, I mean the unnecessary suffering that a lot of intuitive feelers tend to experience. And so examples of that, and see if you can relate to this, is like overthinking about certain situations, a reaction that someone had towards you or a reaction that you expressed, overly ruminating on a mistake that you've just made, like taking things really, really personally and playing scenarios over and over in your mind, like what you should or shouldn't have done, or what you wish you had said or didn't say, or fear, like being completely caught up, immobilized, and giving into fear, making up excuses as to why you can't do this or you shouldn't do this. Basically any sort of noise that keeps you caught up and takes you away from moving forward in your life and being productive. So needless suffering, not to be confused with the suffering that comes from, say, the loss of a loved one, or the growing pains that we experience, which is good as a result of challenging yourself objectively and reflecting on your approach so that you can continue expanding. So let's revisit the grounding journey and how we can reduce our needless suffering. The core message of grounding is that we're only ever feeling our thinking. And I'll pause for a second because it tends to hit people the first time they hear that. Some people not, but we're only ever feeling our thinking. We're not ever experiencing what's happening out there. People and situations, they cannot put a feeling in us. It's always filtered through our own perspective and perceptions and our thoughts. And that's what we feel. You know how we go like INFPs feel everything? I used to say this all the time, but no. I was only feeling my own thinking, which means that I just had a lot of thinking, which is why I was feeling so much. And the implications of really understanding this and seeing this is that your thinking can decrease by a lot. It doesn't really make sense to stay caught up anymore or continue to add more noise to an already noisy mind, which means less suffering, which is awesome, and more mental bandwidth, which is more space for productive and creative thought and objective thought to flow through. So the direct experience and realization of this principle can be extremely liberating, because with this understanding, the outside world no longer becomes this like really scary place, because we create the scary in here. Even if you have an unfavorable situation and it happens, you're still only ever feeling your thinking about that situation or that circumstance. So again, the recurring thought patterns, the endless rumination, or really getting caught up in, the way that we distort reality, it just doesn't really seem like it's the right way forward anymore. And I'll give you an example. Like, have you ever watched a movie where you find it absolutely hilarious, right? But your mate's kind of like, meh, it's kind of crap, right? Or let's say someone says something to someone, right? And one person is totally offended. You're like, what the, and the other person's like, it wasn't that bad. Well, it's because they have different thinking about what's being said. And when you really get this, you can move from a place of needless suffering to one of taking ownership for what's happening up here. Okay, so let's say you're into grounding and you're like, how do I become more grounded? How do we become more grounded? But here's the thing about thought. Like, grounding would be easy for all of us if thought and what we paint up here in our consciousness weren't the most powerful creative force in the universe. What shows up in our consciousness, the beliefs we hold, the conditioning, and the sensations that we feel in the body mind, they're not so easily dismissed. The movie that we're involved in up here can really, really feel like it completely absorbs us. It's like Have you ever played that plank game on VR where it kind of tricks you into feeling like you're standing on top of the building, you're looking down and you're on this tiny little plank, and you start feeling all the, you know, the anxiety, the fear. And I've seen some people actually like freaking out because they get completely absorbed by the experience, and that's what's really happening out here. And that's why without grounding, we really feel as if someone else can put a feeling in us, or the circumstance is making us feel this way, because that's really the creative power of thought and the impact that thought has on this body mind and the illusion that it creates. So then how do you see through the illusion and reduce the needless suffering? I'll give you guys 2 quick tips for the sake of brevity in this video, but what you can see with grounding is absolutely endless. It just gets deeper and deeper. But the first one anyway is a horseback rider analogy. So imagine that you're on a galloping horse and it's picking up speed, and you see in the distance that there's a cliff, right? So there's danger ahead. So what you do is, on the horse, you obviously pull back, right? You become aware of what's happening in front of you, because you know that if you keep going down this path, you're gonna fall off the cliff. Now, you wanna do that internally. Like when you notice certain thoughts that are taking you towards danger, let's say you're at a train station, right? You know, train of thought, yeah? And you feel this train of thought arising, and the train station is getting busier and busier. You know, it's picking up and there's all this heaviness is coming around. You know, when you start to see that arise, you know that if you invest or you jump onto this train, it's going to take you to different stations and scenarios. It's going to take you to different thoughts and different stories. So instead of jumping on the train, be the person that's standing on the platform watching the train, because you know if you hop on, it's going to take you to the wrong location. So don't hop on, because what happens is that after a while, your mind will settle and a new train will come by. And this train will take you to the right location, and it will actually be useful and productive. Number 2, just be open to seeing things a little bit differently. You know, it's kind of like a paradox, but something I tell my clients, which really seems to help them, is look for the unfamiliar. So if you're used to getting lost in old patterns and the needless suffering, and you know, you're trying to figure out life from the noise up here, that's probably familiar for a lot of people. Look for the unfamiliar. There's a space, and this is all about awareness, right? There's a space within you that can observe all the noise without completely being caught up. You know, look for that space. It's the space we're familiar with when we were kids. It's the space before all the conditioning and societal conditioning and our family's wants and diswants, and even our personality, like the INFP, the INFP-ness came about, right? If you continue to explore the principles of grounding and you see through the mind-made illusion that, you know, that creates suffering, this is the beginning of your grounding journey, or self-awareness. You know, you're observing the self and where it takes you. This can be the first insight a person can have along their grounding journey. It's like, hang on a second, there's this movie playing up in here. I can see it. I see the reactivity, these usual thought patterns that are, you know, trying to keep me caught up, and all these emotions in my body are swirling around, but I'm okay. I'm not completely identified with it. And so when you have that insight, you're at the beginning of your grounding journey. And it only gets better and deeper from there. Like the insights and realizations and what you see expands, and it becomes more embodied over time, and you really don't get caught up in thought as much. There's a huge reduction in the amount of time that, you know, we spend, and in my experience, spend up here ruminating on unproductive stuff, which is great, because that means that there's more mental bandwidth and space to be productive and really actually go after what you want. So that's all I've got today, guys. I hope that was helpful. Keep moving forward, and I'll see you guys in the next one.